There we go.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Signals and Symptoms podcast. As usual, I am here with my two besties, Harvey Castro and Edward Marks. These are our co hosts, and we have an amazing lineup of guests today. Unfortunately, due to some family emergencies, I was not able to compile my usual updates. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and combine some of these updates separately for next episode. I am so glad that our good friend IK Siegel from Unlock.Healthcare is here, and Dr. John Claude is also going to be presenting. He is has a specialty in pain, and they have done a startup which is called Unlock.Healthcare. Now, this is going to be Edward Mark's proper specialty because what we are trying to do over here is what they have done is extremely important. This is ex-USA, and we're going to help them and work through them to basically bring this to USA. What they have done is how to use cannabinoids in different specialties, including pain, epilepsy, Parkinson's, and many other subspecialties, because I think that this is very important treatment pathway. People do forget. Just to remind you, by the way, I come from Gujarat, which is India, Pakistan, and cannabinoids was given to me by my grandmother as a kid so that I eat more. I know there's a lot of stigma around it, but I just want to make sure that people do understand that this is, part and parcel of home remedies. And maybe that's why my wife tells me I'm a little stupid. But whatever it is, I'm just saying that people forget the stigma with this. Before I go ahead and let them formally introduce themselves and the startup, I just want to give you a second story. So I was at UT Southwestern. I was doing my neurocritical and epilepsy fellowship, and they had to go in front of the Texas Congress, not the federal Congress, and basically attest all of these epilepsy physicians that in Texas we should be able to prescribe cannabinoids as epilepsy treatment. And just to let you know that there are two treatments in the ICU that works. One of them is keto diet. I know, insane. Keto diet works amazing for intractable epilepsy. And we wanted to use cannabinoids in inpatient setting, and we were not able to because it's, anyways. And that is something that we're going to talk heavily about today as we go along. So again, Dr. John Claude and Ida Siegel, I'm extremely grateful that you came. This is an important topic. You're giving us the international perspective. And Edward Marks is he's, by the way, ex-CEO of Cleveland Clinic. He's a big proponent of what we call concierge medicine. Basically, even in US, we are thinking that our system is so broken. Honestly, I'm just going to tell you that I don't use insurance except for emergencies. That we need to move towards a concierge-like system as well. So feel free to introduce yourself. Tell me about you, your background, your story, your startup, and then we'll actually have a discussion, all casual, and go from there.
Perfect. So I'll take the lead here. So Itai Segal, coming out of Israel. By personal background, I'm coming from product computer science. I've stumbled upon the problem in cannabinoids or cannabis following a personal story from my father, actually having a motorcycle accident and left with chronic pain in his leg. Being treated obviously with opioids as the standard for chronic pain. And at some point in time where there were sufficient number of Netflix series on the problem with opioids is where we kind of, hey, Father, why don't you try medical cannabis? Coming out of Israel has been using medical cannabis, actually the first one after California, so it's kind of a already existing market, but still coming to the doctor with him, asking the doctor, okay, so how much should he be taking and what? The answer was, it's kind of personal and there's an entourage effect, and me coming from inputs and outputs and closing loops, it felt like, okay, something is off there. So this is what brought me into the cannabinoid space soon after meeting with Jean-Claude, handing over to him.
Thanks, Itai. So for me, fairly standard in medicine, specializing in pain. And when I was doing the pain clinics, that's when it coincided with the regularization of medical cannabinoids in Malta. And that's where I'm from, and that's where I currently am. And that was a perfect timing for me. I found it interesting and decided to do a few clinics privately. Because obviously, with government hospitals, there remained that tension, which made me more interested rather than less interested in cannabinoids, because from the one end you're seeing potential and you're seeing huge interest in this newly regularized medical space, and from the other end there's tension because there's lack of knowledge, there's lack of insights, and in general, where there is a kind of hazy area in medicine, I felt at least that my peers were more inclined to push away from it rather than kind of explore and see what's interesting. It was from those clinics, though, that I did notice that there are a lot of gaps, not just in the information, but how we process the information. And then perfectly is when I went with Itai, because that was when I was looking around for anyone who was interested to solve this problem at scale. And yeah, since then it's been a good few years of combining both my medical path, but also with a startup path in trying to solve these problems at scale, an information problem at scale, but also I would say an execution problem at scale.
So cool. I'm just going to share one personal story. My company name is Save Life AI. It is actually stems from the Old Testament. If you save a life, it is as if you save life for all mankind. It is actually verbatim in Quran. I actually am very sympathetic to what Israel and the rest of the world is going through. May the force be with you, and I'm hopefully every single life is saved. So I just want to say that, and then I hope this conflict just moves away and we are back in a peace situation. So again, I didn't realize that, Dr. Siegel, that you were coming from Israel, and I really hope, and may the force be with you. I don't use the word Lord and everything. I just want to be careful. But what I'm saying is that I'm glad, and hopefully everyone is safe and we continue to save lives. That's the whole goal of this podcast and my company. So prayers and thoughts, and may the force be with you. Harvey, first question.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for coming. It's an honor to see you guys, get to work with you guys. And a big picture for me, just looking at it from a patient point of view, what are some of the top things that you think this product gives to patients?
I guess our patients are the one with standard medication didn't necessarily work for them. And there is always that part of the statistics that, yes, treatment is not as effective as it can be. So we're starting off with kind of the desperate, but what we believe that we are providing is actually back the reassurance of the treatment, actually meeting with a physician, which is not just there to license you. Yes, you can go ahead and try the treatment, but to have the physicians as knowledgeable as possible. We are working with the American Association of Endocannabinoid Physicians, which all of the doctors which are working with Unlock are going through their accreditation courses. So we do try to keep the bar as high as possible. From the care perspective, it would be, and I guess in the vision of most companies, but really to be patient-centric. The fact that we're in liberty of providing the care, we're working with pharmacies, we're actually compounding, so making sure eventually treatment is successful. This is, being at this point in time direct to consumer or direct to patient. This is eventually our one and only KPI, making sure our patients are treated well, are satisfied, and there is actually an improvement in progress of the treatment here. So
yeah.
I'm
sorry to interrupt. I just want to know better, like the product. Can you explain it better to everybody listening? Is it, is it helping the patient? Is it helping the doctor? Is it decreasing side effects?
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'll take our recent launch in Peru. So we are currently working in Germany. Peru we have launched several months back. So a patient would encounter us either through social or whatever channels, hearing about Unlock Healthcare. Through us, he's able to schedule an appointment with a physician. So this physician is working on a custom EHR, more tailored into personalized treatment and cannabinoids. This doctor was trained and actually took the courses in order to be qualified to, let's take the example, an epileptic child. So you're meeting with a neurologist, which is actually trained in the specific aspects of cannabinoids, then a prescription. And this is a very important one because people usually hear cannabis and thinking of flowers. We're not using flowers. We are not using different strains. It's all around different cannabinoids. They are already available as APIs in the pharmacies. So a prescription can be that much CBD, that much CBN, that much CBD, of course, according to available research, which is not necessarily as full, but to provide the physician with all of the information needed according to the patient demographics, background clinical information, and then a prescription. The prescription is being compounded by a pharmacy, which sends it directly to the patient. And this is actually where the patient journey starts the loop, because what we're doing is actually connecting to the patients and gathering as much data as possible on the treatment outcome. So obviously wearables would be a given here. Visual signals, audio signals, whatever we are capturing in the context of that specific treatment, this eventually what feeds back the physician in order to tailor the treatment for that patient needs. Of course, keeping in mind that patients do change throughout time and their symptoms does change. And this is why we're looking at that as a constant loop that eventually is there to close the gap in between the symptom and the product and the service.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, Harvey, I think we are providing the infrastructure to allowing a proper consultation involving cannabinoids. Consultations involving cannabinoids are long-winded things. So there's a lot of information, there's a lot of data about the patient, and there's a lot of processing of that information. Firstly, by the doctor to understand, okay, this is the situation of the patient. These are the cannabinoids I want to start with. This is the titration I want to start. I need to see how that works and then titrate from there. So there's also a lot of changing of medications until you normally find the right one. It's very rare that, first of all, there are no guidelines to say, oh, you need this kind of you need CBN or you need this particular cannabinoid or this ratio of cannabinoids together. So it's a long-winded consultation. There's a lot of working with the patient, understanding where the patient is at, and understanding patient outcome as well. And to add to that, even when you're done, translating that information to a pharmacist. So when I started doing this, like in Malta, we also have some. They're the last ones left, I have to say, but we do have some compounding pharmacies. So where the pharmacist is nice enough and smart enough to be able to take a prescription and actually make one themselves. And this is important for something like cannabinoids, where there aren't really any products or many products which you can just take off the shelf. So this is another huge array of information, which the pharmacist has to know. They have to know the different cannabinoids and the different ratios, and they have to understand what's going through your head when you prescribe this, not that. And then when the patient is coming in 2 weeks later with a different prescription because his reactions have changed, and all this complexity basically requires infrastructure. And that is what we're providing the patient. We're providing the infrastructure for all this to happen, for the doctor to know what to prescribe in the first time, for the doctor to know how to follow up that prescription, and for this complex prescription to be made and delivered to the patient by a pharmacist who's understanding and supporting the process.
Thank you. Awesome. So first of all, there are 7 dimensions. We're going to stick to all of them. Number 1 is the stigma. Number 2 is understanding what we call compounding pharmacy and how different strains of cannabinoids can be used to different treatments, and how the ratio and also the dosage needs to be changed according to this. Then we're going to talk about international regulation, US regulation, and then finally we're going to go ahead and talk about what we call essentially concierge medicine and how we can come up to this. Now, It is very interesting, by the way, that federal government in US is still not collecting taxes on some such important thing. But let's just start with the stigma. Now, actually, just start with the what you suggested, Dr. John Claude, that there are different strains, different ratios, and different dosages. And that requires essentially the infrastructure. And your intelligence is important, that how you build into your product and then goes from there. Can you give us the audience to understand that why different strains are there? I can talk as a neurologist that a different strain for epilepsy and different strain for pain control and everything, but give them a little bit more idea behind what different cannabinoids exist, why the ratios of collecting them and mixing them together is important, and how dosage, and more importantly with your digital platform, which is amazing, by the way, and you can show it if you want, or at least talk about it, that continuous monitoring leads to dosage adjustment. So
Right.
sorry. Go
Right.
ahead.
So now, the first thing to understand is when we talk about a cannabis plant, that cannabis plant, more than one, so there are hundreds of cannabinoids, right? Over 120 that we know about, probably hundreds more that we don't know about. And every
Exactly, I didn't
cannabis
know that.
plant, every cannabis
Yeah.
plant is really has a fingerprint of cannabinoids and other substances that give it. So that is, it's when you had to process the plant, so you cultivate it and then you produce an oil or resin. That oil, that medicine, which has been used and was home remedy and has been used for generations, and there's so much anecdotal evidence about, that isn't any singular cannabinoid. That is a group of cannabinoids altogether, which is it's only true for that one plant, because a sister plant, another plant growing somewhere else, will have a similar group of those cannabinoid molecules, but in a different either ratio, or some new ones will be there or some other ones won't be there. So it makes it a similar but yet different medicine. And what we have observed as a civilization, anecdotally, over the past years, is that different strains, people have tried different plants and said, hey, I tried this plant and it helped me with this. And someone else said, well, I've tried this one, it helped me with that. And realistically, thousands upon thousands of these anecdotal evidence is really the biggest amount of evidence that we have. So this is much bigger than the collection of the gold standard randomized controlled trials that we normally look at, which is both good and bad. It's definitely not the level of information that we would like, but the breadth of these anecdotal information tells us that there is something here. And a lot of the studies have actually built on that. So with that basis of the cannabis plant being one, having many cannabinoids, and these different cannabinoids each have different uses, which we're only now in recent years starting to isolate and say, okay, this one, CBN, this one is actually really good for sleep because it helps metabolize the sleep architecture, maintain the sleep architecture, and other ones for different reasons. So that as a basis is why there is this complexity and why you need infrastructure, because essentially this is a data problem. There's a lot of data which is different to the kind of data we're used to in pharmaceutical, and I did work a little bit in pharma for a few years, and in pharma it's all about that one molecule. You're identifying one molecule, and that is a $1 billion molecule, or at least you're investing $1 billion in that molecule because you're expecting to make $20 billion out of that molecule. That's essentially pharma, or at least how I understood it while I was working in it. With cannabinoids, it doesn't work that way, because you can identify one molecule, and people have identified CBD, which makes people feel better. People have identified THC, which makes people feel better, also makes people feel fun. But essentially, none of those in isolation is your $20 billion medicine, right? The real the baby and the bathwater here is the combination of those different cannabinoids, which can be a medicine which can be personalized. Why? Because it can be changed according to the need. So that was my best attempt at trying to simplify the huge complexity with cannabinoids and why cannabis medicine is a bit different to the normal medicines that we deal with.
So Mr. Siegel, he actually went through the process of essentially understanding that there are multiple different kinds of cannabinoid molecules. Each has its own specialty. And now we are creating the infrastructure that is going through this. Now, here's the thing. I'm a schmuck neurologist, and I don't believe in it. Let's just take that as an example. Now, what I'm trying to say is that when you were, actually doing this, you said you actually onboard and train neurologists. Can you walk me through that process? That, for example, I have a Parkinson's patient which has three problems. Number one, he's tremoring significantly, and he's basically utilizing a lot of calories, so he needs appetite stimulation. Similarly, he has a hard time going to sleep. And then thirdly, he has significant anxiety and depression. Now, if you're going to onboard me as a physician, as a neurologist, how do you teach me using your software to onboard me as a, because let's just be honest, I have an education gap. I'm telling you right now on video live that I have an education gap. Now, how would you go ahead and fix my education problem so I can help the patients?
I guess starting off with physicians, and obviously Dr. Jean-Claude had mentioned the RCTs and the fact that it's still non-existent in such a way that a pharmaceutical company would approach a doctor and say, this is the research, this is the prescription, this is the outcome. And potentially it's better than the previous medication that was prescribed there. The difference here is that we need to start with the doctors who actually want to be educated, usually because they have stumbled upon cannabinoids and patients and understood there is actually a mechanism here. Working, for instance, with veterans and understanding that cannabis is actually, I've noticed that patients using cannabis are potentially less, prone for opioids or alcohol or potentially other more severe substances.
Yes.
It's always starting off with the group of doctors who actually want that, because the rest of the group, which unfortunately is very big at the moment, are working according to the existing standards, which is perfectly fair of RCTs, and we need RCTs in order to do that. But let's take, again, here's an example. It would start up.
That's what always Edward Marks teaches. Find the champions. Find the champions, and once you get the champions, then it flow through. So perfect. So you got the champions. You train them first.
Actually, it's not us training. So as Jean-Claude had mentioned, we have looked at the best education possible and found the American Association of Endocannabinoid Physicians. It's actually accredited courses, but we make sure that you as a neurologist would pass through the basic courses and the advanced courses, an example, epilepsy and Parkinson's. So this is for us the point in time that we would be happy in referring patients to you as a doctor in order to provide them with the care that's needed. The EHR is actually quite easy. So nothing, we try to keep it as simple as possible. So going back to your example, you as a physician obviously would go through the standard questionnaires, assess the symptoms, and this is where we'll provide you with the clinical background according to that demographic, and of course the relevant symptom and the disease itself. And you as a physician would actually take the decision of what needs to be prescribed. We're still not in a position that would able to say, this is actually the best practice for 65-year-old man suffering from a mild Parkinson symptoms. We are hoping to have this in the future, but at the moment it's more on the data gathering and making sure that the physician, and this is the second loop that we would love to work with more physicians, is actually on conducting research. Because assuming we already have a patient, which is medication, is much more tuned than I'm consuming cannabis. We're discussing here in specific molecules. This is a huge opportunity to conduct research in large scale. And this is actually
I personally, let me, so Edward Marks is here, and Ed's wife, Simran, is an amazing physician, provider, and she is actually owns a medical spa. And we have had discussions about peptides, which are being, utilized, cosmetics, and etc. And I know cannabinoids is a different category, but there's cannabinoids who does not actually zero impact on mental faculties. We know that now with some of the cannabinoids, and some of them do, and some of them have amazing impact on delusionizing you. So it depends on the actual formulation, as Dr. Jean-Claude said. So Ed, for you, my question is, do you ever think in future we will have these specialized cannabinoids, especially who does not impact mental faculties that much, will be like an over-the-counter peptides, because peptides are a similar problem, right? There are multiple forms of it, formulations, and then you can actually prescribe one or two, and maybe one day have this precision personalized medicine through peptides and cannabinoids together.
Yeah, I would agree. It's like that now with compounding with GLP, and it's all customized, personalized, and we're seeing that with peptides as well. So I definitely see cannabinoid as the next area. So yeah, absolutely.
We have to work on Texas, though. Texas is going to be hard.
Yeah, a little bit, just a bit slow to adopt.
For some reason, this is a big issue. Okay, so now I understand that you were going to have this, American board certified society causing this education, and then I prescribe it to the patient. Now, Harvey is an emergency medicine physician. I'm a neurologist, and Ed is, of course, on top of us because he's the CEO of some hospitals and board member and everything. Now, Harvey, I feel personally right now that I am losing control. Like, it was very easy. Aspirin 81 or 325 milligrams or Keppra dosage 1500, etc. But I knew the molecule in Keppra is levetiracetam. And then I can have this dosage adjustment only. Now you're telling me that with this one, that actually the formulation is not under my control. Now, how would physician react to it? Or you personally would react to it? And I can tell my opinion, and then we can talk to them about how they actually manage physician expectations.
Maybe just and sorry, just to barge
Okay.
in, the physician is actually in control because the compounding is done by cannabinoid and not by formulations. So he's able to tweak, as Jean-Claude had mentioned, the different cannabinoids and terpenes according to his vision and clinical vision, and not just working out of the standard one.
So within the platform on the Map mobile app, I actually can select, okay, this cannabinoid was recommended by you, but I can adjust to improve
But
or
I would like
decrease or
to
whatever.
reduce it, and because the patient is suffering from a liver disease, and I don't want to overburden that, and this is why I'm reducing the amount of CBD, as an example.
Yeah, I'm probably the odd doctor in a way, because I really think we need to be doing personalized medicine. I truly think if there's one drug and there's a bell curve and there's only 2 doses, what about the extremes? What about those weird situations? So I'm biased when I say I think this is the future of medicine. This is where we should be headed. And because we have AI, because we can find out what my genetic makeup looks like, who I am, and create that molecule or that personalization instead of those 2 doses, I think that is magic. As a doctor, I can tell you, if I give everybody in here a certain medication, that bell curve, some of you guys may have really bad reactions, some of you might not. But what if I could adjust the dose to create that optimal play? And I feel like this is what we're talking about. Ed, I know you want to say something.
Yeah, I was just putting in the chat because I have to be kind of quiet here at the gate. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. We're seeing it now with GLP and peptides. It's all personalization. Simran's practice is becoming more and more about this because of the personalization. No one wants to get one size fits all, especially with medicine. So yeah, I think we're onto something here.
So let's assume we get the IRBs, and I can do that for you. And then we have some physicians and providers here in US that, by the way, I have access to 150 medical spas over Texas, supposedly, which is cash based. And let's say we start a research program. What Dr. Jean-Claude and Dr. Mr. Siegel, what would be your vision to actually get this data? Now, let me ask you a little different problem. So if I do a clinical trial, which I've done that as a co-sponsor, you have multiple problems. One is no therapy, then multiple different therapies in terms of dosages. Then on top of that, your complexity is multiple different formulations. So how do you design this clinical trial? Not just a clinical trial, I suppose data aggregation process. That is kind of hard to do with cannabinoids, isn't it? because not only you have to control for dosages, you have to control for different formulations, and then you have to, figure out how to monitor if it's improving or decreasing. Because let's just be honest, people say that this is all subjective improvement rather than a blood test or an imaging biomarker.
Claude, would you like to start, or shall I?
Oh, go ahead, Itai.
Okay, so
Too hard of a question. I'm so sorry.
I think it's perfect. We have touched upon that briefly, and we can kind of double click into that. Obviously, the challenge now is not necessarily around finding the right dosage or the right formulation for one symptom. It's kind of how we can make a system that dials in different patients, also taking into account patients and symptoms do change throughout time. So this is one aspect to that. So it's really the RCT to prove personalization is potentially better than a standard dosage. So this is kind of where that would lead to. Obviously, given the fact that we're also collecting the data, and to relate to what you have mentioned on the bias aspect, because taking sleep is one example. A claim can be, I don't sleep well, but once you connect my Oura Ring, Apple Watch, whatever, we are connected to that many wearables, it kind of removes a lot of the bias into, okay, this is actually the outcome, and this is the before and the after. So this is on that aspect. I guess the challenge here, and relates maybe to even the company name, Unlock.Healthcare, is how you engage with the patients in such a way that propels something which I feel that should be different. You have discussed in one of your last podcasts on payers and providers alignment, and this is, I think there is a true opportunity now unlocking because of Perplexity just released a working app which connects to all of the wearables, connect to the EHRs, connect to whatever, and the patient has this data. But the question is where, I guess, humanity would take all of the technology and innovation that's already happening, on a weekly basis. I don't envy you just providing the updates on a weekly basis on what's happening, because it's so fast. But the question is what's the end game, and how we use this opportunity to build a healthcare system that's potentially better than the existing ones. Obviously, looking at the US, which is one mechanism, Europe is another, coming from Israel, it's a third system, just as 3 examples. How we actually improve healthcare in such a way that it's more sustainable for the patients, providing the ultimate goal of better care at a lower cost.
Mm-hmm. I agree. One thing I'll add as well, I think the outcome is everything here. So the outcome of a trial, of any experiment that we do, it needs to look at the patient journey, or the outcomes of the patient, using not just cannabinoids, any medicine in the current way, in the best current practice, versus using it with this data infrastructure. And we talked about cannabinoids, but we also talked about peptides and other molecules. And I think the essence of what we're saying is that in order to have personalized medicine, it's a great thing to say, and there's so much potential in cannabinoids, in peptides, in all of these molecules where you need that degree of personalization. But we need, and we have the data nowadays, and we also have the technology to process a lot of data. But what we are missing is the infrastructure to put all that in and actually execute. So when I started, I said, it's an information problem and an execution problem. And we talked a little bit about the information bit, but the execution bit is how to get all this data, all this potential that now we have with AI and with these advances in medicine, but how to actually put them into a patient journey, how to improve patient outcomes using these advancements in technology. And I think that is the main thing that we want to be working on, is to be refining our system and to make sure that it can improve outcomes in complex treatment areas like cannabinoids, like peptides, where things are new, where maybe there's a bit of controversy, or maybe there's an information gap, and make it easier and make it fit in better with the medical system we have now. So another point I want to make is that we are not trying to be radical or change the system. Rather, we are finding areas of potential which so far do not have the right attachments into the main system. So this is why you can't prescribe peptides and cannabinoids in the same way that maybe we were used to prescribing and we're used to working in the medical system per se. But we're trying to add a plugin to the system, which will allow cannabinoids and peptides and any other medicine which can be personalized to its best effect for best outcome of the patient, and for the patient not to have to do anything special to get that. So it can be just as available and accessible as any other medical program that there is out there.
So Harvey, you're a big proponent of using data. You have the Oura Ring. By the way, a small story. So me and Harvey were at a conference, and he was showing the Oura Ring to a hot female, and then he put the Oura Ring on it, and then my first reaction was, and I told him, he's a good friend of mine, so you put a ring on it. So that was one of the best situations. But what I'm saying is that Harvey is a big proponent, and he actually does go ahead and also teaches people that, hey, this is important. But here's my problem, Harvey. I use it personally, but I have never used it professionally. So this is he suggested, Dr. John Clark, very importantly, is an implementation execution problem as compared to theoretical or knowledge problem. We do all agree that data is important, but why do you think there is a consistent change? And I'm just again giving you a history. EHR integration and implementation took 10 years, required a significant bonuses because Obama said that if you don't do it, this is your penalty. If you do it, this is your extra money. And then we got implemented. So Harvey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm biased, and again, full of bias today. I love my own personal data in the sense that we have all this rich data, but we're just sitting there, right? And so he just mentioned that Perplexity now allows me to connect it. Basically, that's what I'm doing, big picture. I'm connecting my genetics. I'm connecting my digital footprint as far as all the data I have on the wearables, my EMRs. And then I created my own digital twin so that I can talk to myself and be like, okay, here's this medication. Should I do it? Here's this vitamin. Should I do it? How do I do it? As a doctor, I can get away with it in a sense because I can know when it's hallucinating, when it's not. I can adjust the parameters. So I really like what these guys are doing. So my point is this. We're all sitting around all this data, but why not use it for our healthcare?
But teach me. Let's say, Harvey, I'm here, and I'm telling that there's a Parkinson's patient, and that the Oura Ring is able to see how much tremors we have, or the Apple Watch is giving you how much tremors we have. And that directly correlates to, I can send that data to John Claude, and then he can design a personalized therapy for that patient. First, of course, we have to remove the access issue. Then, of course, we need to remove the reimbursement issue. I'm going to spend this much time to data. I don't get reimbursed. Why should I do it? I'm just being honest. And then we have the third one, that, of course, the whole thing. And do you see a future, and if so, what is the timeline, where this is going to become standard of care, Harvey?
I chuckle because traveling all over the world, I'm loving what I see. And my theory is this, and I love to see what they think. The following. We're going to start seeing applications like what they're doing in Peru and Germany. Around the world, we're going to create FOMO. We'll be like, wait, why don't I have that here? And my prediction is our politicians will start looking at this and saying, wait, here's a higher cost of healthcare. Here's another country that's doing it way less. What are we doing different? Why can't we do it? And we're going to start seeing some radical changes in certain verticals of medicine. And so I'm really excited because I'm biased and I say, I think it's going to happen. When is it going to happen? I actually would not be surprised if we start seeing some crazy changes here in the next 2 years. And again, it's sort of silos. Example, Utah now, if you're depressed, you can go using AI to prescribe that medication. A year ago, did you think that would be a case? No, I didn't think that was going to happen, and it happened. So where is it going to be in the next 2 years?
Wow. What do you think, Dr. John Claude? Just looking at two big continents, US and Europe, what do you think the projection of regulation in general for digital health and monitoring solutions, and then specifically talk about cannabinoids, and of course, Mr. Siegel can chime in.
I think especially in Europe, both for cannabinoids and for digital health, we've seen an explosion in the last 5 years. So the way things have changed um, is incredible. And if you look even the previous 5 years, you almost don't remember how we could have worked differently. So I remember as a medical student, everything was paper based, and then we started getting into digitalization of the medical records, and then things followed from there. But when you look at the speed at which things happened, I think Harvey's prediction is again, I'm biased, of course, but I think it's very accurate. I think regulators, although I guess we can imagine sometimes things to be slow, but when there is momentum, I think they pick up the pace very, very quickly. And at least in Europe, we've seen digitalization not only allowed, but actually incentivized. So in Europe, in the European Union, there's actually an incentive for countries to have digital transformation. And putting it simply, it's rewarding the countries who can manage to have digital transformation in all areas of government, and one of them being healthcare. So I think if Europe did it, I'm quite sure that across the pond, the US will be looking at implementing something similar. When it comes to cannabinoids, it's been perhaps even more progress in even less time. So you look at Malta in 2018 being a tiny country in Europe, being one of the first to have a full framework both for medical and recreational use of cannabis, which tend to go together, I guess, in from a regularization point of view. And now you're having, this is spreading all towards Europe, Latin America, down under, Australia, New Zealand. So this is really a global phenomenon, which is taking the world by a storm. And the fact they're happening at around the same time, it's wonderful serendipity, I think, and even more reason to include cannabinoids in this digital revolution. Because if we do have the technology to do it, we should be doing it. There's a poem I love. I can't quite remember the name, but it's by Alexander Pope. And there's a saying which goes, well, where angels fear to tread, the fools rush in. So I think for anyone who, again, is still a bit on the fence about it's a bit, stigmatic towards cannabinoids in general, saying, oh yeah, let's definitely do personalization, but let's leave cannabinoids out of it. I think, and I have seen really wherever we, as physicians here, so this is really a shout out to physicians, wherever we do not go and we do not say, okay, this is a substance which can have benefits and can also have harms, we need to own it and make sure we are driving that change and telling people how to use cannabinoids and how not to use cannabinoids. We need to be there. We need to be the ones who are first there and who can drive that. Because if we're not, someone will find other applications which may not be as beneficial or may indeed be harmful.
So true, especially, let's say, take an example of pain. You can have narcotics, you can have stimulators, you can have physical therapy, occupational therapy. You can even have psychosocial therapy in which you're addressing to address your pain better. And then, of course, hopefully, cannabinoids, which again decrease. The biggest problem is depression, overuse of narcotics, which can lead to death and suicide. And I think what you're suggesting is very, very important. For me to take a holistic care of the patient, we need to ensure that I, as a physician, or we as a physician community, needs to understand that there is one more tool, and it is our job to use it and improve it. Perfectly said, Dr. John Claude. So Harvey, back to you. Now, you keep talking about global stuff, and we discussed with Dr. John Claude in terms of US and Europe. What are your thoughts other globally? Because you travel to many countries, including, of course, Singapore, which you are directly involved as an advisor to the health ministry. Thoughts about acceptance of cannabinoids and in general, just cannabinoids. And then, are they therapeutically using it? Because I'm just going to be honest, I have no idea.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. When I was recently in Singapore, I saw a big ban of any kind of vape. If you brought it into the country, you were in trouble. So you can even bring any of those things. This was kind of interesting. I'm personally going to be in Peru next month, ironically. So I'm definitely going to see what cities and see if there's a way I can kind of check out these pharmacies and see this, in live. It'd be kind of cool. My begs the question for people that are out there. It's like, okay, when is it going to be here in the United States? I personally want to know, when is it going to be in the United States? So can you guys tell us what's that path? Is this going to be a medical device? Because technically, it's at that line. It cannot be, depending how you do it. So I'd love to see your thoughts.
So there are several ways, obviously, to go about that. Last year, we were also part of the Mass Brigham Acceleration Program. So US is definitely high on our radar.
No pun intended, right? Sorry.
at this point in time, obviously, US in the loophole of hemp versus cannabis. Some states are medical, some states are recreational, some states are still holding back. So there is definitely still accessibility of, I would say, the right products. The services, as you rightfully said, also are not reimbursed at the moment. So the entire mechanism is still not tuned towards that. We do believe that if and when Schedule 3 happened, and President Trump kind of alluded to that late last year, that it's going to happen. The question is literally on the when, because this is where a lot more research can be conducted, potentially reimbursement further down the line. So a lot of the things that we do want to see in healthcare, we do have a specific state that we are looking into more heavily due to the fact that no, far from that. That we were actually looking into more medical ones, and specifically one where pharmacy can actually dispense now cannabinoids, which brings the entire conversation into, okay, there is actually a pharmacy and a physician and a prescription, which is kind of the mechanism that we want to build upon. There is a go-to-market which is kind of independent to that, as anyway, kind of taking the advantage that cannabis at the moment is, I would say, not under the radar, but at least in the state's discretion to decide on the how and what, and to kind of build towards that. At this point in time, we do believe that other territories, although less compelling from market size point of view, would be easier for us to actually engage with the healthcare providers, be more of practice more of what we want to be, instead of just tackling the biggest market, which is obviously a big decision to be made there. But go ahead, Jason.
Oh, sorry, Ty, no, finish up.
So just to conclude the sentence here, obviously this is a big decision. We are very, very attentive to the markets. We have started off in Germany, in Peru for specific reasons now, and now over to Israel. So the roadmap is definitely quite dispersed in terms of geography, and obviously US is still a very big part of that. I do believe that later on this year we'll be very tuned on the Schedule 3 and have our ducks in a row.
100%. I think one of the things, Junaid, that you mentioned, which I want to just pounce upon, when you said, "Oh, is it California?" What we need ultimately. So this is. Could you call it a medical device? I guess the closest thing would be right, a medical device, and what we need is that medical layer of legislation. So you have legislation, and our infrastructure sort of fits on top of that legislation and plugs into ideally medical infrastructure, which is utilizing cannabinoids. So we are talking about when working with pharmacies and hospitals prescribing. So just to put, and obviously nothing against California, but California is very well known for its recreational cannabis culture. So there are shops where you can go buy cannabis. We're not talking about that. So that's I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we feel is that, like Itai very well said, the US is still a mix of some states have a medical program and they invest in the medical program. Some states it's more just recreational. Some states don't have anything at all. So what we really need is for there to be more of a medical emphasis, and for that to be really nationwide. And I think one of the biggest steps forward for us in terms of things that happened was the rescheduling, because we want cannabinoids to be on the mindset of doctors, pharmacists, and people who are on hospital boards who say, listen, cannabinoids are important and we want to be, they will be very important and very probably lucrative in the future. And we want to be the first ones to take steps towards offering this in a medicalized sense to our patients and our community. So what we really are looking for is for these institutions to say, hey, listen, we want to step into this territory. We want to be the first ones here, and we want to work with people who are already developing things outside of the US in order to develop and build our capacities within cannabinoids in the US. So this is, if I had to have one ask or what I'm looking for, it's really more of the the big medical institutions rather than it's not being very fair, and sometimes it could be a bit of a buzzkill, but we're not looking for the cannabis shops. Kind of, this is not recreational. This is not something, and everyone knows, THC, that you can get high on it, and there's a whole different world which I'm not going to get into. But it's not what we're doing. What we're doing is definitely medical. So we are looking for those medical institutions to maybe look away from the cannabis culture, from, I guess, the stoner stereotype. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about compounds which are coming from the same plant or a similar plant, let's put it that way, but which ultimately have a medical purpose and a medical intention. So that is really what we want to see and what we need to see in order to be able to take what we're doing into the United States.
Harvey, last question.
I know there's people out there that want to reach out to you guys. So what do you guys have, a website, LinkedIn? How can people follow you guys and kind of stay abreast of what you guys are doing?
Leaving details on the website, newsletter, always great. Reaching us over LinkedIn, perfect. In whatever ways and means, we always love to communicate and discuss further and seek for potential cooperations, either with other startups, healthcare providers, anyone who is interested in the field. It's always an interesting conversation to be made there.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I'm thinking out loud, and I'm not trying to put you in the spot. So is there a way of some kind of API that other startups can kind of connect with you guys and use some of your tools? Is there something like that?
I would say not at the moment, but we definitely want, I've briefly mentioned on, okay, what's the compass? What's the end goal? For me, the end goal of everything which is happening is kind of an open source that, different companies can plug in, be certified, and kind of circulating healthcare in a very different way that it's at the moment, which is aggregation of abundance of EHR devices, whatever. So short answer, no. Longer answer, we would love to pursue such opportunities.
Awesome. Well, sorry, Jide, one quick question. We got 5 minutes. Do you guys have anything else that you guys wanted to share? You're like, oh my gosh, we want to talk about XYZ, or we're about to go into X country, or I don't know, anything.
As mentioned, Israel is the next territory for a given number of reasons, mainly the healthcare providers and reimbursement, same as Germany. These are actually the reasons why we're working in those two territories. Aside from that, physicians, I guess the physicians hearing us are always welcome to try and to see what we can actually do together, either from a research or from a clinical perspective. And maybe last comment to follow on an earlier comment on hoping the world would end up in a different place in a matter of days or weeks for everyone, literally.
Correct. For everyone. And I want to emphasize that I don't know politics. I don't care about politics. It's just so stupid spending time, money on this crap when we have to save lives. Anyways, again, may the force with to everyone in the globally, so that we can bring peace, so that we can spend the money that is deserving to go into startups like this and saving lives. Again, reminder, if you save a life, it is as if you save the life of all mankind. This is why I wake up in the morning. And I know Harvey wakes up in the morning because of the same. And Edward Marks is a good friend that has, literally that's his life mission, helping being a board physician at multiple places. Now, here's my take. Cannabinoids have multiple different molecules that are different systems. We need to build an infrastructure which is different than our medication, and that is where Unlock.Healthcare comes in. We need to understand that we need to do a monitoring in which cannabinoids is one option, and within their platform, the infrastructure, it can actually help you make more decisions, including physical therapy, occupational therapy, even narcotics use. And again, you can decrease the narcotics use in multiple places, including antidepressant use, which is causing, by the way, people forget alcohol and cannabinoids do it. You think that antipsychotics and antidepressants don't do it? It does impact your mentation as well. So you have to have this tool within the system. So number one, if anyone knows any place that Dr. John Claude and Mr. Siegel can start a clinical trial, and doesn't have to be a hospital level, it has to be medical, it has to be mid-market, let us know and touch base with them and start with them. And I'm assuming they're going to help you with all the consultations that they need. And then the second request, by the way, Mr. Siegel and Dr. John Claude, I'm going to set up a complete, just a recorded event. We're going to go through your platform, just click on share so that you guys have that available. It's going to take 2 weeks or so, but I'm going to do that. And then lastly, if you save a life, it is as if you save a life of all mankind. May the force be with you. Hopefully we can put all of this crap behind so we can put all the money towards health and not destruction. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you next week.
Thank you again for the opportunity.